Good morning, Brian from the Glenn Close Was Better Brian here. Cruella and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Emma Stone is the latest live-action Disney property. Not quite a remake this time of an older film, but that's not much of a distinction. Functionally, Cruella's the exact same thing. I just hate these movies so much. If anyone's still curious why my hatred for these films runs so deep, for the sake of cohesion and brevity, I often bypass many fundamental things that are true about all of them, because then I'd have so many reviews where I just repeat myself. But with Cruella, let's get back to basics. Let's talk about the barriers this film has to work through from the get-go to get my benefit of the doubt back. Number 1. These movies are part of a stylistic holding pattern. I don't like the way they look, how they tend to represent the characters I love, and oftentimes the performances are really weak. They're really directed by committee, so I can reasonably assume the style itself is probably gonna carry over between films. Number 2, like all of these movies, it's a lazy cash-in on people's nostalgia. I've met people who don't see this as a problem, but I don't know, don't you feel exploited when you know this is not a property or a story designed from the ground up to stand on its own? As far as Disney remakes go, Cruella's actually quite special in this area. Consider why this is not just another remake of 101 Dalmatians. Is it really because they wanted to do a different interpretation of the character, or because Cruella de Vil is the only character people remember from the original? Which do you really think is more likely? Number 3. In most of these remakes, especially Mulan, you can see Disney trying to reuse the same kind of story structure they made work for the MCU, or they're riding some other trend. But with Cruella, they are clearly, obviously, shamefully copying Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn and Joker. Riddle me this, why is all of the promotional material curated in such a way that her face is completely white when no other incarnation of Cruella de Vil was that way? Could it be because Disney saw something popular and decided, shit, someone other than us came up with something that made money, let's cash in on it before audiences move on to the next thing? And this speaks to what I just said, that they're not considering the story itself so long as it has the characters you recognize. Number 4. I talked about this in my video reacting to Disney announcing all of their new Marvel, Star Wars, and spin-off shows, but Disney's putting out so much content in part to overwhelm the news media cycle. There are very smart people behind their release schedule whose job it is to anticipate how long they can milk the online buzz of one property before moving on to the next one. So long as they supply content, this'll continue. Now, to an extent, every studio does this. But with Disney, it's becoming increasingly obvious which films are only there as part of content culture, to force outlets into handing them a journalistic monopoly, using their popularity as leverage. So there you go, a couple things that all these remakes have in common, and then all the other flaws of the film then stack on top of. Which happens a lot in Cruella, cause there are a lot of those. Holy shit, this film is bad. But before I get carried away, there are actually things about this movie that are good. Emma Stone is actually playing a character. You're never gonna beat Glenn Close, but she is trying, and sometimes I saw this film's version of Cruella more than I did Emma Stone. And the costume design is great. If you're into cosmetology or fashion, you're probably gonna dig the movie for that alone. By having a single good thing about it, Cruella is a better film than all of these. But that's it. And even those things are just like a thin sheet of flair that fails to conceal any of the movie's other problems if you just lift it up a little. No amount of popular songs without proper backing will make the story any better. The film's biggest problem, well, one of them, is that it's about Cruella de Vil, because that means eventually the movie has to reconcile that its girl boss protagonist is a future aspiring puppy murderer. To be clear, I have no problem with making a movie about somebody who's morally reprehensible. It's just that Cruella de Vil's legacy as a character is so simple-minded. Her name is literally Cruel Devil, feminized. She's pure evil, and it's great. If she's not going to be evil, what other part of her character are you drawing from? There's nothing else to her, besides maybe camp, but I'm pretty sure Disney is philosophically incapable of doing that. Disney cannot do punk. Disney cannot do counterculture. This is a triple-digit billion-dollar megacorporation. They are the culture. You could say they're doing a different interpretation of the character, but how is it a different interpretation if you have to fundamentally change everything about who the character is? At that point, are you not just creating a whole new character? Never mind, the entire film was marketed as Cruella's origin, so why would you create an origin story for a version of a character we don't know? Well, Disney tries to have it both ways. Origin movies these days always feel the need to explain every single little detail about their subject, even if it's unnecessary and stupid. That's why Han Solo's name was given to him by a disgruntled customs worker. Alright, very slight spoilers ahead, but this trope reaches critical mass as we find out Cruella's mother figure was literally killed by Dalmatians. And at that point, I wanted to leave. Disney, you fucking serious? You're making a Gaston prequel, or his parents gonna be killed by, I don't know, feminists? Or books? It's not just stupid and on the nose. By presenting Cruella with a reason to hate Dalmatians, it kind of admits she still becomes the same character. Otherwise, you'd have no reason to justify it. But at the same time, they keep trying to sweep that part of her character under the rug. Cruella is the straightforward hero now, because Disney thinks that in order to like a character, you have to think they're absolutely in the right, like the inverse of an Eli Roth script. Going so far as to imply that Cruella is not just who this person is, but a split-style alter ego. Disney, did you just forget your villains are often just as popular as your heroes? Why are you so at odds with yourself? The Glenn Close one is not a good movie, but you apparently understood it back then. Cruella was the cornerstone of the entire film, but you weren't supposed to agree with her objective. Once again, they do not understand or do not care what made their own films good. And to think this is just the conceit in Cruella's concept. The story is largely boring and predictable, but by being a prequel it kinda stumbles off the hook of actively ruining the pre-existing material the way a remake would. It's about 5 different movies and tones fighting for room, and the only one I kind of enjoyed was the second half of the first act when it was just Emma Stone and her 2 friends doing crime. Cruella's surprisingly long and dense with plot, but none of what happens is properly built up. It communicates a lot of events, but not much information, and every big set-piece scene begins way too quickly and then ends even faster. It was during the big rock concert sequence I realized what's happening on screen should be fun. I like having fun, and I should probably be doing that right now. But the general pacing of events blocked out everything but the superficial. It's trying to have kinetic energy, and in different circumstances with a different editor and script, I can see these exact same events making that work. But the film just isn't well crafted if there's nothing but shortcuts to substance that never arrives. It's restrictively unimaginative for a movie about glam rock and fashion design. And fuck me if I know what the stakes are by the end of the film. I remember before the climax somebody says, "We have to stop the Baroness," and I thought, right. Stop her from doing what exactly? We don't know what this character's endgame is. Imagine someone taking a brand new Bugatti and trying to sell it to you after pounding it into a cube. Yeah, smartass, the parts are all technically there, but they're not in the right place or put together correctly anymore. That's Cruella. The moment-by-moment stupidity isn't quite as abrasive as the other Disney remakes, but thematically it bears as much fruit. In a reversal of Cruella's usual avaricious portrayal, she's a street urchin with an eye for high fashion, and able to use the gate-kept power of the upper class against them through nothing but her born talent. A neat idea, but Disney continues in the tradition of cartoonishly pompous rich capitalists or otherwise agenda setters as the villains while failing to recognize the irony there. When Cruella's a kid and in school and her headmaster looks like the nostalgia critic, it put in my head the idea that this film plays out like the clipless review of itself. The acting's over the top, it all looks like it was filmed on a green screen edited by a guy who knows fuck all about how to make it look good, and the story is reduced to a bulleted list of things that happen. Reception to Cruella is actually quite positive so far. Many are calling it a step in the right direction, or the one that doesn't suck. Maybe. It is better, yet nothing the film has going for it isn't negated by something else. It tries to be stylish, but the filmmaking is too shallow. It tries to be dark and edgy, but is still far too difficult to take seriously for that. It tries to be funny, but most of the acting is so bad the delivery falls short. However, I had to start all of those sentences with, "It tries," which is more than you can say about the other ones. And I'm giving this one a 3 out of 10. Anyway, did you like this movie more than me? Less than me? Well, if you care to, please tell me. And as always, if you like not only words, but the way I arrange and then say them, please consider giving this video a like, helping me out with the algorithm, and subscribing to me, Brian from the channel Brian. Thank you, and goodbye.